Recording in live. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the cream to my sugar. He is the Abbott to my Costello. He is the fence to my post. The host with the most. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Blackman.
Thank you, Jorn. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Virtual Coffee with Ben. My name is Ben Blackman. I'm the Director of Development for Ridge. That is Royal Innovation Design Group, which is a group of innovation consultants based in St. Petersburg, Florida. Before we get started, as always, I want to encourage everybody out there to go to the Ridge YouTube channel and our Facebook page to hit the like button, share all of our great content. You can also schedule your own virtual coffee session with me. We can talk about how Ridge can help your company innovate more effectively. Today, we have an amazing guest this morning. His name is Brian Kornfeld, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Synapse, which is a nonprofit organization. It is built to help Florida's entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems thrive. We're going to be talking about all that today. We're also joined, of course, by Jorn Oppelt. He is the Director of Creativity and Innovation for Ridge, and we have Philip Leslie. Philip is one of Ridge's many talented visual strategists. He's going to be doing a graphic recording of the interview today, and we'll be posting that online along with everything else. Good morning to you all. Thanks so much for joining us. Brian, I got to start. We'll get into your professional background in a moment. We got to start with some sports. And as your background is indicating, you are a very, very big sports fan, as am I. I got to ask you, what was it like to see the Tampa Bay Lightning hoist the Stanley Cup trophy on Monday night?
Oh, man. Well, I knew this was coffee with Ben, and so I had to make sure I brought my appropriate coffee mug here to drink out of this morning. So cheers.
I love it.
I actually grew up in the Tampa Bay area and started playing hockey right in the early 90s, right when the Lightning started. My first job was a hockey ref. I was at the game in 2004, Game 7 against Calgary. I have a picture on the wall that I took of the scoreboard after the game. It was an amazing feeling. And the best part about it actually was being at home, because I could have my 6-year-old boys stay up late, watch the game, give them big hug, big family celebration with my wife. And it was just one of those moments as a dad and as a family that will take forever. And it's so great for this market. It's so great for this region. 2020 has not given us a lot of positives. It's been a brutal year for a lot of people, but for one night, if lightning could strike and we could put a lot of smiles on people's faces, could get some good celebrating in, worth every minute. Really proud of the Vinnick Sports Group, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the whole organization, everything they've done, everything they've endured over the last 5-6 years, even since they first made the final against Chicago, last year's sweep against Columbus. I could go on and on about this. What a feeling, what a night. So happy for this area, so happy for the team.
Yeah, it was great. And I did see on your Twitter feed, you posted a video of you celebrating with your family and your kids. It was beautiful. I'm hoping that everyone in the community at least got a smile for a little bit. It's been a rough year for a lot of people out there, but the Lightning definitely gave us some joy, and hopefully they'll continue the run. I do think, as you mentioned, it's a great story of resilience as well, and kind of overcoming some obstacles, which we see in the business community a lot right now, of, you know, teams and companies having to overcome unforeseen challenges. And last year, the Lightning were the best team of all time in the regular season, and it got swept in the first round. And, you know, they used that as motivation to come back and win the whole thing this year. So that was a really kind of cool story arc. But now that we've got all the important stuff out of the way and celebrated the Lightning.
Regina watching online says, go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thanks, Regina. Go Bolts.
And we want to talk about your professional journey a little bit. Now, you have an extensive background in aerospace engineering, so that makes you a legitimate real-life rocket scientist, which is awesome. I think you're the only person I know that is a rocket scientist, and if I was a rocket scientist, I would be just going around town telling everyone, hey, I'm a rocket scientist. But
my wife says I'm only allowed to say it once a day, or say it's not rocket science once a day. So I abide by that rule as much as possible. My mission is to get that in the next 21 minutes.
There you go. Well, I've prompted you, and that is obviously something to be really proud of. But you kind of went a little bit different path. You've co-founded and are now the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Synapse. And this, again, focuses on Florida's entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems. I'm curious what led you down that path to start Synapse, and what can you tell us about the organization, where it started, and kind of where you're going with it?
I mean, there's a number of different stories and arcs that go along with this path, but a lot of it had to do with opportunity, finding some gaps, and some right place, right time moments. I had transitioned my career a few times after the aerospace world, the defense world, got into big data, launched my first company in 2013. And in 2016, I started just wondering why my company that was doing all right, it was making a profit, had never really gone to the next level. And one of the things that I did, I had finished my MBA about 2 years before, was I did a SWOT analysis and looked at some of the threats and some of the weaknesses. And one of the things I noticed was some of the trends going on in Tampa Bay and this market. It just, something wasn't clicking in the market. And actually had an aha moment when I had met someone at a networking event, and he basically looked at me and said, "Why haven't I met you in the last 2 years? I could have been sending you hundreds of thousands of dollars of business." And our offices were within a couple blocks of each other. We were at events all the time. Just nobody thought to connect the two of us. So then I dug in a little further. And actually, ironic that this is 2 days after the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup, because some of this impetus came from a chance meeting with Jeff Vinnick. I met him at an event that he was speaking on in 2016, and he talked a lot about real estate and hockey. In the last 10 minutes, he talked about this idea of an innovation hub and trying to figure out how to help propel the entrepreneurial market here. So I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I'd love to find a way to help." And somehow, some reason, he decided to take a meeting with me, which I'm still thankful for to this day. And at that point, I had about 30 days to do real research and dig in and understand why. In that 30 days, I got invited to a 4th of July party. And at that party, I ended up meeting a gentleman named Mark Blumenthal, who was doing the exact same research and had come up with the exact same conclusions. And he really was this driving force and this real, he was very determined that he wanted to do something about it now as an investor perspective. And brought in a third gentleman named Andy Hafer. And Andy is this big community thinker. It's his word, or his line is, "There's no stronger force in the universe than a community." And so you have this community thought process. You have Mark, who's this big picture visionary. And luckily, with all of this and all the research and these plans in place, they asked me to come along for the ride and say, "Hey, can you actually run this and operate this and drive this with the research you've done and the things that you've learned?" And I said, "Great, this sounds like a lot of fun." And I owe a lot to them. I owe a lot to Jeff and actually driving me to do that level of research at certain things that we still use today, and realizing the big issue that we saw was that the Tampa Bay market and even the state of Florida, we got a lot of stuff here. And the stuff could be talent from the universities or research or investors or startups or businesses and customers. What we didn't have is the connections between the stuff. And that's what makes the difference. And that's where Synapse really plays this role, is helping to connect everybody, helping to make sure that the right arm and the left arm are talking to each other, helping to make sure that people can get the right resources that they need and the right education they need, and that we're telling the good news and we're celebrating these wins. We have a lot of wins, and it's worthwhile to celebrate when ConnectWise sells, or KnowBe4 gets $1 billion valuation, or ReliaQuest gets a $300 million investment, or even a small company starts to grow and get $5 million of ARR. There's so many things that go on here that we just need to talk about it. We need to really promote it and start telling these stories locally so people get excited here, but also nationally, and having people view Florida and view Tampa Bay differently than we get portrayed sometimes. People think of us as Florida man and the alligators and the hurricanes and all this bad stuff that is really easy to just poke fun at and laugh at. But we got a lot of really cool things here. Like, there's a lot of benefits here. There's a lot more than just beaches. And so the business community, the innovation community is really thriving. It's going to the next level. And we're really starting to find that voice of what those stories can be.
It's great. Love hearing the origin story and how everybody kind of came together to make this thing happen. I'm curious, since it started, I believe it's just over 3 years now, How has the organization changed in that time? And I'm really curious to know how COVID has affected everything that you guys are doing internally, but also externally with the entrepreneurs and innovators that you're working with. How has COVID changed the landscape for the future of Synapse?
Yes, I mean, like we can have the BC days, the before COVID days, and then the after COVID days, and it's a night and day difference. Before COVID, there was a lot of growth, and not to say that there hasn't been growth since, but it's been a very different type of growth. There was a lot of excitement and a lot more of this in-person community feel in Tampa Bay. Embark Collective opened in January of this year and started having people. With Tampa Bay Wave was going to another level. Tampa Bay Innovation Center is bringing new people in, and they're building a great new facility in St. Petersburg. That you see more of the people really coming together, a lot more meetings in person. The summit grew to its biggest level yet of over 7,000 people just in February. And February was right before all of this shut down. We were 30 days out from when we actually closed our office at that point. And little did we know what was about to hit us dead on. So that excitement level was really coming together, and that whole community feel and that sense of belonging and being a part of this and driving it. And one of the cool things about being in this community here is everybody has an opportunity to help with the growth. If you're in Silicon Valley or you're in Chicago or New York, the only way that you become a blip on the radar is if you are a unicorn or a billion-dollar company or you become a big investor. But here, everybody has their mark along the path. And that's a really cool opportunity that not a lot of places can get. Since COVID, the community, obviously, there were certain aspects of it that slowed down right in the beginning, but there was others that really sped up. We saw Florida funders putting some more money to work. We saw seed funders putting more money to work, finding companies in these verticals that really are innovating in this time of crisis and innovating for good, not just taking advantage of the situation. So it's not like COVID sped everything to a halt. It just made people think a little bit more critically, made people think a little differently about their situations. I'm a Six Sigma black belt and big study on lean. So it gave people opportunities. And I saw really leaning out the companies and getting rid of the excess fat and the excess that people were working on and the unnecessary tasks and things that weren't really driving value, and focusing on what's the value for themselves, what's the value for the company, for the stakeholders, the shareholders, and the community as a whole. Synapse, we had to do our own little pivots. Luckily, we did get our big summit in time, but we had to start thinking ahead. And so we started thinking the virtual space. And when we had a couple options, we easily could have just said, let's go away for 6 months and kind of hide and sit in the background and not do a heck of a lot. And nobody probably would have noticed, and it probably would have been okay. But we didn't want to do that. We really wanted to keep the community meeting and keep driving value. So we started a Live 8 and Learn, which is a Tuesday afternoon webinar. Now we do it every other Tuesday, where people are encouraged to have some fun and maybe bring a beverage of their choice, whether it's coffee or normally I'll have a bourbon, wine, whatever it might be. And that's been very informative, and people have gotten a lot of takeaways out of that. Then we also did a virtual conference in June, which brought some great success. Over 1,000 people attended over the course of 3 days. And just something different, ways to get people engaged, ways to bring things to people at a convenience level that's very different. In a virtual conference, you don't have to be online right at the right time to hear a speaker. You can watch something later. You can be interactive. You can meet people online. You can talk. You can be a part of this community and still have that feel. The other big thing that's come along over the last few months has been a lot of the racial equality conversations. And there's a big difference in the way that certain races are treated in the innovation world. Only 1% to 2% of venture capital goes to Black founders, which is something that we've started to put a focus on as well, of how do we help to bridge this gap? How do we make sure that there is diversity, equity, inclusion in the innovation community? How do we make sure we're reaching out and everybody's reaching out to multiple communities? And some of that is starting to talk within different industries. The gaming community, for one, is a community we didn't really get overly involved in the past, but we've realized that hits a different urban community. So we're starting to put more of a focus there. And so that is really starting to help. And we're starting to see some levers be moved a little bit. And we're taking a lot of snapshot data now. I'll be really curious to see what the data looks like in a year, and with some intentionality and not just some knee-jerk reaction, some long-term and sustainable improvements. There's a lot of very strong opportunity for the entire community to thrive.
That's great. And I'm really curious to see, moving forward, if, the virtual stuff you've been doing and adapting will sustain, or if you'll go back to more kind of in-person stuff. Like the business community at large, that's a question I have, is how much or will we just be changed forever? If you're just joining us, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that right now. I do think there will be some virtual workforce going forward and virtual events going forward. I do think in the next couple of years, we're going to see a progress back to the mean. You always see progress and regress to a mean. You look at a baseball player who hit normal, they're a 275 hitter. If they hit 300 one year, the next year it's a decent chance they're going to hit 250.
Yeah. And they probably play for the Royals. If you're just joining us, you're watching Virtual Coffee with Ben. I'm Ben Blackman. I'm the Director of Development for Ridge. I'm joined today by Brian Kornfeld. He is the co-founder and CEO of Synapse, which is a nonprofit that helps Florida's entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems. If you like what you're hearing, you want to get more of this content, you can go to the Ridge YouTube channel or our Facebook page. Stay tuned for more conversations just like this one. Well, Brian, you had discussed the actual Synapse Summit that happened earlier this year in February, took place in Amalie Arena. I was fortunate enough to go. It was a fantastic event. It was my first one. And I got the opportunity to watch you interview Jeff Vinik, who owns the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you told the story of having a chance encounter and meeting him. And that kind of was the impetus to start Synapse. What was the summit experience like for you? What was it like getting the chance to be on the main stage, talking to Jeff Vinik, and what did you take away from him and the other keynote speakers like Sarah Blakely that you had from Spanx? How do you apply what you learned out of that to the innovation community here in Florida?
Yeah, that's some great questions. So the summit for me is a little bit of a blur usually over the course of those few days. A lot of running around, making sure that everything is going right. I get very detail oriented over those few days, making sure the production's going well and that things we're posting out on Twitter and Instagram are going well. There's so much that goes into it, but it's not just me, it's a whole team. And I really have to thank the entire Synapse team. And that goes to the full-time staff, and we're a very small full-time team, the contractors, the volunteers, the interns, everybody who's a part of it. I wish I could name all of them here. We end up having about 40 to 50 people really working as the team, and then 300 more volunteers on site over the course of the 3 days, the 2 days that people see, and then load-in day. And so there's so much that goes on there. But even the full-time team at the now that's here, between Lauren Prager, Monica Angel, Brett Maternowski, Ali Gannon, our two lead contractors, Wes Lehman and Daniel Cura, all of them, our intern Reagan Smith, do such a phenomenal job. Kimberly Wander, who runs Elevated Events, that's what helps make this all look good. DCE Productions, everything they do on the main stage. So I have to thank them. We'd be nowhere without this team. Interviewing Jeff was one of those amazing moments for me, just being on the stage, especially with everything that he's done. It's interesting because when I interviewed him, it was almost 10 years to the day that he bought the Lightning. And I asked what he'd like to see over the next 10 years. And he said 10 Stanley Cup banners. So you got to start with one, and he's 1 for 1 here. So 9 more in a row to go, Jeff. No pressure. But he talked a big vision for this area and how we can really bring everybody together, and how the real estate's going to matter and transportation is going to matter. And all of this plays in the pieces of a puzzle for growth over the course of 10 years. It's not just a snap your fingers and turn around type thing, and that everybody has a part and everybody has a role, and if everybody contributes, everybody benefits. One of my biggest takeaways from Sarah, and this was actually not something she said on this stage, this is one of those actions speak louder than words moment, was the fact that she broke her ankle the day before and she still showed up. 99 out of 100 keynote speakers who break their ankle the day before would probably just say, I broke my ankle, I'm putting my foot up, I'm sorry, I'm not coming. And I never would have questioned her. I'm sure I would have had a lot of questions to answer publicly, but the fact that she still showed up shows the type of person that she is and the type of business person that she is. She's a person of her word. And being a person of your word and having that level of integrity matters so much. And then if you heard her talk, you could hear her talk about the integrity. You could hear her talk about how she tried so hard. She was selling copiers door to door to try to make money, and all the different challenges she went through and all the different things she went through, and trying to open up doors that she struggled to open, being a woman in business and trying something completely different as a true innovator. There's a reason she got to the level that she did. And I still learn a lot from her day in and day out, following her on LinkedIn, learning those lessons, even seeing some of the stuff she does on Instagram and how close she is with her family. It all makes a big difference, and it all can help take people from one level to the next level to the next level.
Yeah, I certainly came away super impressed with Sarah Blakely, and I think the story you tell about her ankle really sums it up, to just the fact that she went through with that when it would have been really easy just to say no. Says a lot about her character. Speaking of characters, Jorn Oppelt's been patiently waiting. I want to bring him in real quickly. I know he's got a question for you, Brian.
Yeah, I'm going. This has been great to listen to everything. But Brian, I go all the way back to the beginning. The thing you said about the perception of Florida, and basically as a huge trailer park. Like it is the move to virtual going to affect the sense of place, right, or minimize the sense of place in business, and emphasize or elevate a sense of space, right, or connectedness? And if so, what does that do to the image or perception of Florida? Does that change? I remember as a musician, back in the 80s, it was the sound was death metal, right? Like we were the death metal capital of the world. And then in the 90s, we moved to this kind of like Sister Hazel jangly college rock thing, So you're right about the identity of place. And I wonder how the move to virtual or hybrid work environments is going to affect image and perception of place.
I actually think it helps us, because we've always been seen as a business friendly state. We've always been seen as a state where, I mean, I hate to say this out loud, but you can pay employees a little bit less, and that's because there's no state income tax. You cut 8% off, and that's not 8% that's just going to nothing. It's 8% that's not going to the person, not going to the state. It's a break even at the end of the day, other than for the state government. It's a place where people go to vacation, and you get a lot of people who say, I get to work where people vacation. I get to make more money. It's a very inexpensive cost of living. I've been out to San Francisco and had to buy a $12 cup of coffee before. It's not fun. It's really nice to be able to do things. And one thing that I've always noticed about Florida is we're very authentic. We stick to ourselves. We're very proud of Florida. We stick to who we are. We stick to our guns. We stick to our missions. We stick to trying to tell the right stories. And if we can continue to do that, it helps that people can start to work in other areas. A company out of California can pay somebody 10% less or 15% less or 20% less to work in Florida. The person's still taking home more money. They still have a less expensive cost of living, and they can enjoy the area where they live because of the climate, because of where we are. I do think that there is a lot of strategic advantages. We just have to, as a state, make sure that we brand it and market it correctly. And there are some great organizations like Enterprise Florida who are doing this day in and day out.
That's great. Well, Brian, thanks so much for joining us. We're just about out of time. Before we go, where can people go to find out more about all the great work that you and your peers are doing at Synapse?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about Synapse, go to synapsefl.com. We also have our next upcoming virtual event the week of November 16th. It's coinciding with Global Entrepreneurship Week, so it's really a week and an event. We're going to do the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th for about 3 hours a day for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, 2 distinct tracks. It's going to be an entrepreneurship leadership track. We're going to do things like inside the C-suite. It's going to kind of be like inside the actor studio, where we interview one-on-one for 15 minutes, some leading CEOs from around the state. We also have a startup toolkit. So if you're thinking about starting a company for the first time, or you're starting a company, you can learn more about what to do. And that's being driven by our statewide university system, which is great. So you can learn more about that at synapseconverge.com. And stay tuned over the next, call it 30 days or so, when we start to release some more information about Synapse Summit 2021, which is coming back, and we're really excited. So we're going to start talking about that publicly in the next 30 days.
That's great. Can't wait to read more about it. And we'll be sure to post links to those websites when we post this interview out. I want to thank you again for joining us. Great conversation. Again, if you're interested in learning more about Ridge as well, you can go to our website, which is www.ridg.com. You can go to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page for more content. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you next time. Take care out there, and go Bolts.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.